Our first speaker today is from the Daily Bugle. Um, you may think that he's a photographer, but he is actually a legal advisor in a private company. He he gives legal and corporate affairs advice. Yeah, and so he is going to be speaking for the exhibition of Piss Christ. And so I present to you Peter Parker. Peter Parker, could you take the stage?
Oh, hello. My name is Peter Parker and I am for Peace Christ. I'll begin by citing a quote from the artist himself. A representation of the crucifixion of a man who was tortured, humiliated, and left to die on the cross for several hours. This is the intention of the artwork known as Peace Christ, as quoted from the artist Andre Serrano. Be that as it may, to some, the artwork may appear as the work of a degenerate. The artwork is anything but a deteriorated, debased, and corrupt piece made by a degenerate. It looks like it's intended to show Jesus in a bad light, but that was never the intention. But if you thought otherwise at first, I don't blame you. We humans are critical creatures. Sometimes we interpret something as a mistake. Depending on our experience and beliefs, we may even disagree or have a dislike for something. We remember these things, and we tend to remember mistakes more. Kinda like that saying which goes, first impressions last a lifetime, especially if you had a poor first impression. However, sometimes we get so caught up in our emotional based opinions, we forget to look at what's good. I'm not suggesting that you are not allowed to have a different opinion on the art piece or disagree. What I mean is that we should broaden our perspective and to see the bigger picture and make our judgment based on facts. The objective of the photograph is to make people think about what happened on the cross. It wasn't made with the intention of rallying people up. So what's wrong with displaying this art piece? In my humble opinion, this art piece should be shown in the art gallery. Nonetheless, maybe your concern is with your tax money being used to fund this art exhibition when it could be spent on other matters. You're not wrong. After all, it is our constitutional rights to question the government on how our money is being used. Ironically, as taxpayers, we don't get the choice to choose how much money or how our money is spent by the very government we voted in through a democratic process. Not to mention, our current government came in through the back door. But even if you did not vote for the existing government and did not get what you think you voted for, why should we point at art for sucking up all our tax money? It's not as if the government is spending all our tax money on art and art galleries alone. Although some of you may say that a lot of money is wasted on art, consider this. The United Nations reports on corruption said that a total of $2.6 trillion, or 5% of the world's gross domestic product, has been wasted globally on corruption. Compare that to the 877.8 billion, or 4.5% of the United States gross domestic product, which is being used to fund the NEA. Way more money is wasted by corruption worldwide, yet we see art as the problem. Unlike corruption, the money used by NEA is for a good cause. The reason Peace Christ and artworks alike were funded using tax money by the NEA is because a significant portion allows people in the high rate of poverty neighborhoods to get recognition and aid them financially. Not only that, but another big portion goes to artists with disabilities, veterans, and those in institutions. Taking away funding would mean denying these people the monetary support they need. All that needs to be done to display Peace Christ in an art gallery is to give people the intention which the artist wanted to convey in their artwork. Make it the intention clear to the art gallery visitors. I urge you to exercise reasons in making a decision on which side to vote and base them on facts. The name's Peter Parker, and with great power comes great responsibility. The power is in your hands to make a fair and just decision. Thank you.
And now I invite the audience to ask invite the audience and other speakers to ask Peter Parker any questions you wish to ask him.
All right. To answer your question, did Serrano ever state the intention of this photograph? Yes, he did. There's several interviews which you can find on the internet where people ask him about the photograph, and I've quoted from one of the interviews, which is the intention he had. So yes, he did state the intention of his photograph.
And what was that intention?
The photograph was to represent the crucifixion of a man who was tortured, humiliated, and left to die on the cross for several hours.
I have a question. Peter Parker, how would you defend opinion that art should be beautiful and this particular artwork is not? It's not, you know, for some people it's offensive and it's not beautiful.
So how would I defend that it is beautiful? Is that your question?
Yeah, how would you, like, if people go up to you and say this is not art, this is probably a piece of junk, so how would you respond to that?
Well, if they feel offended, they have the ground to take action against the perpetrator, which in this case is Andre Serrano. They can, I guess they could bring it to court of law and say it's a bad artwork. It offended them, I guess. Is that your question? So it offends them, right? And it's also not beautiful, or is it just not beautiful? I don't quite understand.
You don't understand the question?
No, but what I mean is, do you mean the artwork is just not beautiful, or is also not beautiful and it offends the person?
Yeah, not beautiful, and maybe to some people they find it offensive.
Yeah. Well, they can bring this to court actually, and they have to prove that the artist intended to hurt their feelings or provoke their feelings with the artwork. And this goes under civil action and not criminal law. So if people find it offensive and they want to take action, to sum it all up, they can bring it to court and ask to take legal action against the perpetrator, which is Andre Serrano. However, Andre Serrano himself can also defend himself in court. But that would be a whole nother story. But yeah, hope to answer your question.
I put another question in the chat. You stated that you would help people understand the original intention. How would you propose to do that for this exhibition?
I guess there's quite a few ways you can go about this, but the way I was thinking, maybe what they can do is, because art piece usually have a little like white block next to it or something that says the name of the art piece and whatnot. And additionally, what the artist can do is also put their intentions and the meaning behind the art piece on that little block next to the artwork. That way, when people look at the artwork, they can also look at what it means, the artwork next to it, so they can also get a deeper understanding of it.
Our next speaker is Drake, Drake's secret twin brother. He is a retired art lecturer who formerly taught in the prestigious school of A3. With his wise words, he wishes to enlighten on the piece Christ. Mr. Drake, can you please take the stage?
Hello, everyone. My name is Drake, and hopefully by the end of this speech, I will be able to convince you on why Piss Christ shouldn't be in art museums. So I'll start by saying art museums, a place of creativity, ingenuity, and talent. Now, every step you take, another art piece emerges over the horizon, demanding your attention and judgment. Piss Christ is no different. Among thousands of other religious artworks, why is it being singled out? There are a set of rules that we humans have to abide by as a member of society and especially as part of religion. For example, we shouldn't vandalize sacred statues, we shouldn't lie, we shouldn't kill, etc. These rules make up society today, and when the public perceives something that violates these set of rules, this is what causes them to feel anger and possibly frustrated. If you have a sibling or two, you understand that from time to time, your parents just can't be bothered. They treat you guys fairly, and it is in no way the parents' fault. However, you will feel undoubtedly bitter and annoyed. Although there is meaning behind Piss Christ, There are far better ways to express gratefulness towards Jesus' sacrifice, and then submerging a crucifix in blood and urine. If you still find that the blood and urine is merely a depiction of Jesus Christ's death, and Andres is simply doing his part as a Catholic, you should read that Melbourne hosted another Serrano exhibition featuring photographs of a woman urinating in a man's mouth, a woman squatting naked before a horse, and a clergyman gagged with a studded leather collar. Now, there is no way that Andres is as firm of a Catholic as he claims to be. Furthermore, the fact that the piece eventually netted Serrano a whopping $15,000, considering that the piece itself cost him at most $10 and an empty bottle. That's a pretty big profit. If you didn't know, the National Endowment of Arts, or the NEA, as of 2016, appropriated $147.9 million, of which could have been given to the needy, education, or healthcare. As of why art should be defunded, there are an abundance of ways an artist can market their passion and skill, such as offering tutorials and creating ebooks, coaching or mentoring students, create profiles on creative selling websites, or network with other artists and creatives. There are so many ways for artists to make money. It almost becomes a shame for artists to rely on the government financially. Besides supporting artists, the NEA helps others in poverty to experience art, which is a great mission. However, like any federal bureaucracy, the NEA wastes money on tax dollars. The NEA wastes tax dollars on administrative overheads and bureaucracy. The Cato Institute's Sheldon Richmond and David Bowles note that thanks to an NEA grantee, the American taxpayers once paid $1,500 for a poem. Like it. That wasn't a title or a typo, that was the entire poem. In addition to such frivolities, the endowment diverts resources from creative activities, as artists are lured from producing art to courting federal grant dollars. There are other ways that the NEA wastes tax dollars. Author Alice Goldfarb Marquis estimates that approximately half of NEA funds go to organizations that lobby the government more money. Not only has the NEA politicized art, but because federal grant dollars are mutually interchangeable, they can be used for other purposes besides the support or quality art. In addition, approximately 19% of the NEA's budget is spent on administrative purposes, an unusually high figure for a government program, which means that for every $1 million granted to the NEA, 190,000 is spent purely on administrative purposes. Without a doubt, His Christ shouldn't have been hanged on the walls of any museum, and such situations must not happen again. So it's your choice, His Christ or not. All right. So thank you for reading/listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Brake, for your views. And now open up the Q&A session to the audience and fellow speakers to ask Brake further questions regarding his views.
There are some questions in the chat. I'll read the first one. Who gets to define what is or is not offensive?
Well, I mean, before we even decide on that, I feel like there has to be a line drawn because this piece was exhibited in a museum where all ages could see, like a 4-year-old could go up to this piece and say, wow, like possibly getting, influenced negatively, especially if he's very young age. And I feel like, if someone were to dictate this art piece as good or bad, and it would definitely be the owner of the art museum itself, or maybe the government.
Okay, thank you.
Well, okay. So I'm answering Peter Parker.
Yes, he says, may I know how is Andre Serrano's other work related to Piss Christ and having Piss Christ displayed in the art gallery?
Yeah, okay. So in his interview, Andres said that he was a Catholic, like a pure Catholic all his life. And I'm just trying to poke holes in his argument where he made these photographs that are clearly not Catholic at all. And on why this Piss Christ is actually related to his other art, it's because they came in a set. Andres, Andres, to enter in the competition, he gave in like a whole album of all his pictures, and Piss Christ was one of them, and it won the competition hosted by the NEA. So I hope that answers your question.
So just to clarify, you're saying that taking this picture by itself would not be appropriate because it didn't come by itself. It came as a collection of a body of work, as you've described, with the woman urinating in the man's mouth, the woman squatting by the horse with the penis in her hand, and the clergyman gagged and having a studded collar. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. We have a parent that asks, if he didn't get paid for his art, do you think it would still be shown in the art gallery?
His art. Well, if he didn't get paid for his art, then how did it happen to be in the gallery? Because I don't think that an artist would be willing to. Hold on. Oh, sorry. I think I've answered the wrong thing. Yeah, I think it could definitely still be shown in the gallery, but if the artist is willing to put it in the gallery. But I feel like there should be a line drawn where there should be a section where it's more matured content, so like kids won't be able to be influenced negatively, and there will be like another section where it's free, where kids could just go around and look at beautiful art. So if he didn't get paid for his art, it depends on what Andres feels, If he's a little bit more monetarily focused, then he probably would, negotiate with the museum to give him some money, I guess. Yeah. So Pelvin asked me, why do you want to defund Zoom specifically? Why do you want to defund art specifically? Because we're talking about Piss Christ, and I think that not only artists, there are not only people that want to be artists, there are also other people that have different dreams and different ambitions. So I think that we should just invest in education as a whole, so we can get the most coverage, so that everyone will be happy, and it's not just artists that will be supported. Do you think there are any actions necessary if Piss Christ were to be displayed in the art gallery? Yep, so it will be separated from the more kid-friendly art, and you go to a section where there's more matured content, where there'll be nudity and whatnot.
So you're saying that it could be displayed if it were displayed in a separate section?
Yeah.
Okay.
And now we move on to our next illustrious speaker, none other than Dr. Pelvin Baloney, yeah, who hails from the far lands of Antarctica. She is an artist, as free-spirited as the morning breeze, yeah, and she is self-taught. She is a self-taught artist raised by penguins after being taken away from her parents while naming her Pelvin. Although Pelvin loves art, she is also studying at the University of Detritus to get her PhD. She vowed she would never let a child be named Pelvin again. Dr. Pelvin, could you please take the stage?
Yes, thank you for that introduction. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Baloney, and I am for Piss Christ. Hundreds of years ago, art was one of the most respected mediums in the world. Whole religions and cultures were based around art and its way of telling stories and feelings that no other words could ever recreate. Art brought people together. It brought cultures together. It might even be said that some cultures and practices wouldn't exist without art. But right now, art and the rights of artists are now being reconsidered because of one piece of controversial artwork. Andre Serrano's Piss Christ sparked controversy when it first was shown in an art gallery. Now, I don't blame anyone who doesn't want this to be shown in an art gallery. It is an actual jar of piss. But in this speech, I hope to convince the townsfolk of this illustrious town that Piss Christ should be shown in their art gallery. Despite its appearance, Piss Christ is not defaming Christ. The artist is Catholic, and Catholics tend to focus on the death of Christ and how he died for our sins. This piece does the same, showing how Christ died, bleeding and peeing himself. The artist had no intention of slandering Christ. Although his methods are strange, there's nothing remotely harmful about this piece. Still, this piece may be hard to look at for some, and that's okay. So to those people, I would like to point you to the hundreds of thousands of other Christian artwork that don't involve urine. The Last Supper, the Adoration of the Shepherds, the Tears of St. Peter, the Immaculate Conception, the distribution over the Most Holy Sacrament, and many more. I would also like to bring attention to that most artworks involving Christ and how he was crucified involve blood. Some of these artworks are some of the most iconic artworks involving Christ. So if we were to censor things or put artwork in a different section, most artworks of Christ would be there on the cross. Like I previously mentioned, whole cultures can revolve around art. We see this with the Aztecs, the Egyptians, and almost all of Greece. In fact, when the Romans took over Greece, one of the biggest cultural shifts was their art. It was the way that historians could tell Greeks apart from the Romans. Art had introduced them to new ways of life and sciences. Da Vinci is a great example of this, as he was able to use his skills in art to help him become the great inventor he's known as today. Some pieces of art even inspired his inventions. Most of his inventions may have seemed outlandish at the time. His peers probably even called him crazy. But did you know one of those great inventions were the blueprints of the helicopter? In the 14th century, Da Vinci was planning on building helicopters. Imagine what he could have done with the technology we have now. These are the kind of discoveries art can, my camera's falling. These are the kind of discoveries art can warrant if artists are allowed to express themselves freely. Censoring and limiting art can potentially limit the amount of inventions and new ways of life we can get. Now you might be thinking, what kind of ideas or discoveries could Piss Christ warrant? And yes, it seems completely ridiculous that a bottle of urine could ever inspire anything productive. It also doesn't help that urine is an inherently negative thing, which sways public perception to see this piece as also a negative artwork. But although this artwork is gross, gross artworks have merited impressive finds. For example, Pablo Picasso's piece, Guernica, made in 1937, depicted people dying and screaming in pain. These, again, are inherently negative things. But this artwork was the artist's reaction to the bombs the Nazis were dropping over the Basque town of Guernica during the Spanish Civil War. His way of bringing to attention the atrocities that the Nazis were committing. And it worked. When people saw his artwork, they became aware of what the Nazis were doing. In fact, the piece became a symbol of war and protest. It became so popular that the piece was even used by protesters in protest against the Vietnam War. Now, I'm not saying that Piss Christ is going to become a symbol of religion or Christ, but it's hard to deny the similarities between the two pieces. In fact, Pablo Picasso's piece actually had a lot of pushback into being placed in art galleries too. I'll leave you to think about that. Art is an expression of creativity and freedom. When we restrict that, art becomes sterile. It limits our ability to express ourselves and explore new ideas and themes. In conclusion, limiting artists will only limit ourselves as a civilization and the things that we can achieve. So please, let art Piss Christ be displayed for the sake of our town. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Baloney. I'll now open up the session to the audience. Does anybody have questions for Dr. Baloney regarding her views?
It looks like Peter Parker has asked a question. It's a similar question to what he asked of Break. Do you think there are any actions necessary if Piss Christ were to be displayed in our town art gallery?
I'm going to have to say no. I know how that sounds, but in reality, Piss Christ is just a bottle of urine. It's not inherently anything harmful or that could damage a child. Yes, it's gross, but it's not something harmful. And as I'm sure my mothers would know, that kids are pretty comfortable with pee, and especially peeing themselves. Thank you.
Does anybody else have questions for Mr. Baloney?
Yes, I see another one here from
Oh, there we go.
a participant. What would you say to a person who is offended and wants it taken down?
The first thing I would ask them is why they're offended. Pretty common answers to this question, although I don't want to assume anything, was that it's because our Lord and Savior is being doused in piss. And then I would simply explain to them the intentions behind the artwork. If they were still offended, I'd point them to other pieces of artwork that didn't have urine in them. Although it's completely valid to not like this artwork, I don't believe it should be taken down.
I have a question. What happens when they take that a step further and they threaten violence? And in some cases where this artwork has been shown, there has been violence and there has been damage to property done. What's your response to that?
Well, I'm not sure if that now is an issue of the artwork or an issue of the people. Because, you know, the artwork isn't really harming anyone. It's not doing anything. These are the people that are willing to go out and harm someone because they're not happy with something that isn't doing anything. This isn't an issue of the artwork. This is an issue of the people. And these are people that would do this with other things besides this art piece.
Okay. I'm also curious about the other two panelists. Peter Parker, what is your response to threats of violence that have accompanied this artwork and the damage to property that has occurred when the artwork has been shown in other cities and countries?
Well, I think firstly, it depends on the artist, but you could bring this to court and you could, I guess, ask for compensation for the people who broke it. Maybe you want them to pay fines or whatnot. That's one approach to it. Another approach to it is to let it be and, I guess give people more of a briefing, let them understand the artwork. Maybe they just don't. Because I also like Dr. Baloney, is it? Sorry if I got your name wrong. Uh, Pelvin Baloney, because they say in the chat Dr. Baloney, I got confused. But I also agree with that it's also not necessarily the art's fault, but more of the people. Because art is subjective, and whether you hate it or not, it's really up to the viewer. So if you hate it enough to hate it, I think that's more of the person deciding it and making the decision themselves. So you either, basically to sum it up, you either bring it to court or you just leave it aside and not do much about it, I guess.
And Mr. Brake, what is your response to threats of violence and damage to property that pieces such as this seem to happen when it's exhibited?
Yeah, so I actually read about this, and it said that two 14-year-olds came to the art museum in the middle of the night with hammers and smashed the art piece. Now, like I said, like no grown man would ever think to smash this art piece, and these are two 14-year-olds, which is why I think that Piss Christ should be separated from other artworks in art museums. Yeah.
Thank you. I saw another one in here from someone else. Yes, Mr. Brake, you had asked a question of Dr. Baloney. Other than inventions, how do you think art can benefit society?
I'm sorry, because he has asked this question before in our test runs, so I'm prepared for it this time. Other than inspiring inventions, it can inspire people. Like even with Christian artwork, you see that one person paints a picture of the cross or of Jesus, and another person will paint a picture, and another person, and etc. Also, art can be very good in times where people need solace. In rough times, art has been known to boost the moods of people, and it also helps artists. It can be a good job for people. It can allow you to do something you love and sell something. Art is just, it's very beneficial. Art can help people feel better. It can help bring hope to people. And like I said, it can inspire inventions. And like I said, new ways of life, new sciences. So yes, that's other ways that art that's other things that art can do. And there's many more, those are just off the top of my head.
Peter asked another question. Mr. Parker asked, how much freedom should we give artists?
This is a good question, because we obviously don't want to give artists too much freedom, because it's been shown that some people can be very crazy when they've been given too much freedom. Like, as an example, at one point someone tied a dog outside and starved it and let it die in the name of art. I don't consider this art. I think art shouldn't be anything that involves harming another person. So I think that laws that should be set on art is that they should not harm anyone. They should not be used to attack people or marginalize people. They shouldn't attack people physically either. I think those are the only really rules I'm going to put on art.
I got a question. So, of course, artwork can give positive things for society. I think you once said that it allows cultures to grow, and flourish. But how do you think there are cases where art can do the opposite, and what do you think of that?
Well,
Is it
yes, of course there are. I'm sorry, I'm going to let you continue. Sorry.
okay? Just a little to emphasize more. When art does the opposite, then is it really worth displaying that artwork?
Well, like I said, I don't think my definition of art ends where you should not hurt people or marginalize people or hurt someone physically. But there have been different types of art, like propaganda art and things like that. And I believe that even though if an art still isn't meant to hurt anyone and still influences someone negatively, I think that's sad, but I think that happens with a lot of things, and it's not exactly an art's fault or an artist's fault. Like movies can do that, people can do that, so it's not exactly limited to art. So I think thinking of it more generally, it's just something that happens.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There is one more question from Mr. Brake.
I think it's about the same thing she just was saying, though, of people get hurt. So I think she has actually answered Mr. Brake's question without even knowing it.
Okay. Are there any more questions?
Actually, I'd like to add something to Mr. Brake's question. You said if an art piece somehow causes a riot and people were harmed, should the art piece be displayed still? Yes, because that is the people's fault, not the art piece's fault. It was not trying to start anything that's happening with the people. That's all I'd like to add. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to ask one question. If an art, and this will be to all of you, do you think artists have a moral duty to take down their art if they know that their works are going to incite violence? Is it their moral duty to take it down themselves?
So you mean like in the case of the cartoon that was in Holland, was it?
Yeah, it was in Holland, yes.
Yeah,
That's
and
the
there
one.
were actually people who lost their lives over it. So if you knew that someone could possibly lose their lives, like what happened in Holland, is that what you mean?
Yes, that is what I mean.
I'll answer first then. I think the artist should definitely, take it down, because since he knew that lives were going to be lost, why would you still do that? I mean, it's just not like, as long as lives are like involved, then we should do everything we can to prevent deaths. We should do everything we can to prevent anyone from getting hurt or getting injured or even dying. Yeah. So he should definitely take it down.
I got a question actually about the question you've asked. So, could you read it? Could you ask the question again? Because just want to clarify some things.
So my question is, do you think that artists have the moral duty to either take down or to withdraw their artworks in the event that it would cause harm, or knowing that it would cause further harm.
So
The example
yeah,
that Amy brought up was when some Holland artists drew a cartoon about the Prophet Muhammad in a bad light, and as a result of that, the publication of that work, a lot of people got hurt, and some people lost their lives as a result. And I know this is a response. This is a response that we expect people to have a lot of self-control, but sometimes that's just not the case.
yeah. Okay, well, the way I see this is because it's just from the perspective of a artist who has the power to time travel and knows that if he will put his art up, the future will mean that people die. Is this what we're talking about? Like a situation like this?
Not
I
so
think
much
Wayne,
time travel, but knowing that
100% knowing, or you just feel like it?
I think Wayne has also highlighted something in the chat, which has also happened before. I don't know if you've heard of Salman Rushdie and his satanic verses. There was actually a fatwa, I think, put out by the Ayatollah Khomeini on him to have him killed for his literature, his piece of literature, which is considered art as well. So when you have threats of I'm going to kill you if you keep displaying this artwork, or if you don't take it back, or you don't apologize. Like Holland is an example of that, and Salman Rushdie's Satanic Verses is another example of that. I think that's what they're meaning. Like people's lives are actually being threatened here. And although you don't know whether they will succeed or not, in the case of Salman Rushdie, that fatwa was out for years, and I'm not even sure it's been retracted yet. So he's actually gone into hiding because of it. So I guess that's where the question is lying around, is we may not have a crystal ball, but there are definitely people very intent on harming the artist or anyone displaying that work.
Well, I think it's and any artwork like I guess is okay as long as it follows the law. Like if you know that okay oh god, this artwork is showing the king in a bad way, like that's against the law, that breaches the law. So if you know that, then I think you should be aware that of course if you publish that artwork, you're going to get repercussions and people want to arrest you and whatnot. So I think that's also sort of the line when it comes to making artwork. Like everyone, when you're, of course, when you're making anything, an assignment, you know what you're doing. You're making sure it follows certain set of rules. So in these cases where you know it's gonna harm, you also think about, is it gonna like break the law in any way? Do I, if that's the case, then maybe this isn't the right choice to publish. And I think this doesn't just go for art; it goes for a lot of things too. Like if you know something will, as much as you want to say like maybe it's just not the right thing to say, you'll breach a law and you'll get repercussions, then no, I don't think you should. And I think it's smarter to just stay safe and not publish it.
What happens, like in the case of Holland and this author, Salman Rushdie, they published in places where freedom of expression is widely granted, even against other religions, putting them in a bad light. So it wasn't against the law where they had published their work. But they're still getting threats from other people in other countries who are, or who just want to harm the artist or anybody who displays his work. They don't care that it's allowed by the.
I think it also depends, because when someone is breaking a law but in another country, I think if I'm correct, there's like a certain process that goes through. Like the other government, they can't just send, like it'll be illegal basically if they use their terms in the country this person is in. But like you said, they're also still not safe despite that, because they have to go into hiding. So I think it's really up to just the person who made the artwork. Like, how important is this artwork to them? Do they have to show it to the world? If that's the case, if it was really like their life's work and they don't care if they get assassinated or they get hunt down, then I mean that's just entirely up to them. I'm not the one to make the decision for them, but if not, then don't do it. but it really is up to the artists themselves. They're willing to take the risk.
Thank you, Peter. What about you, Dr. Baloney? What are your thoughts on this kind of situation? The question was should an artist take down their piece if there is a threat of loss of life, like either their life or anyone's publishing that book or displaying that artwork is being threatened with their life, even if it's perfectly legal in that country, but there are others in the country who are going to commit that crime anyway, or there are other people in other countries who won't mind going over to that country and assassinating or hurting those people. Yeah, I think that's the question. When art it becomes dangerous to people's lives, is it the artist's responsibility to take down the work in the face of those threats, or should the artist stand their ground and say, I'm not going to let threats of violence censor ideas?
Well, all right. This is a complicated question, and I believe that it can transcend all works of media, not just art. It can transcend things like sports or anything that you feel passionate about. And I believe that it really depends on the person. If you were to get my advice on the situation, I would say don't do it, because you're putting someone's life at stake. And you're putting other people's life at stake. And my personal rules for art and my definition for art is that it should not hurt anyone physically or mentally or anything like that. So I would say that it would not be something to do, but I can't really tell a person not to do that or something like that. So I know my answer is very similar to Addie's, but I pretty much agree with what he said.
Okay, thank you. I'm curious about our audience. What does our audience think about that? What do you think about when threats of violence are made against works of art like we've just described? Anyone would like to comment from the audience?
I personally think there are many ways of looking at it. There is the perspective of law, there is the perspective of freedom of speech, and arts. So there are many ways. I guess it depends on which way you're looking at it from.
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it too. Anyone else would like to add?
Wayne says he can't decide.
I have a question. I think anybody can answer this. Of course, I hope our panelists will answer this. This is kind of going outside of our simulation right now. This whole project was based around Fahrenheit 451, Ray Bradbury's novel, and it was touching on censorship, and it was touching on when we want to be politically correct all the time, we are afraid of offending anybody. What happens to society? Are we better served when we don't offend anybody, when we just make sure that no ideas that could offend anyone are allowed out into the public, sort of like the society that he described, where they only had game shows and things that were just not offensive on TV and in the media, and even books were burned because they might offend people. Are we better served by not offending anyone, being very careful to silence any views that could be offensive to anyone? What is your opinion on that?
I'll answer first then. Okay. So in his book, he depicted a world where even the word once upon a time was like blasphemy. None of that. So I think there should be a limit, of course. Like, fictional books aren't going to cause someone to die. No one will get angry to the point where they would harm someone just from a fictional book, like a fiction. So I think that there should be a limit, of course, that we should limit art, especially. And it's just that, you know, if we aren't offending anyone at a regular basis, then how are we gonna make decisions? You know, there's always gonna be one side, and there's not gonna be the other side, and we only have one perspective, and that most of the time doesn't lead to like good decisions being made. So I think that there should the world shouldn't be like what Ray Bradbury is depicting, but there should also be like a limit to where an artist can express himself. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Rake. How about Peter Parker or Pelvin Baloney? What are your thoughts?
Oh, well, I think looking at a world where we can't offend anyone, I think we'd have to, looking at a world where we can't offend anyone would be kind of hard, because then we'd limit ourselves so much and there would be no ideas, nothing really new, because people would be too afraid of offending someone else. So I think it's a very black and white perspective to only go to, oh, we have to say everything. You have to make sure that if we don't say everything, then we won't get new ideas, or we can't say anything because it'll offend someone. There needs to be like a limit. And I think that to some extent this is kind of a problem in our society today, that either we're always very offended and we don't really know what to say. So I would have to say that there has, like limits, like Yuden said, there has to be some sort of limit. We need to know where to speak, when to speak, and what to say. We need to know what's off limits, and we need to know when to speak. But I think pretty much that we should be able to speak our minds. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Peter Parker?
Yeah, I think this is quite interesting because the book also brings up, I'll get to it, but one thing about not offending anyone, if you were to actually do this in real life, all you're allowed to do is just make statements like, instead of saying, I like your shirt, just go like, that shirt is white. No one can get offended by it because it's a fact. But if we as a society decided that we all just use statements, that would also render the way we are able to communicate with each other. We won't be able to be as in depth, and we won't be able to get some messages across as well as if we could express our opinions. And what I mean by the book shows that is there's one part where the main protagonist, I think he's talking to his coworker. I'm not so sure. I don't remember exactly, but the way they talk was very like just describing things like black, white, smoke here, something like that. And if we all had to talk like that, I mean, of course, we could get basic instructions down, but I think also we also have to look at in terms of evolution, we're not going to be going forward, we're going back because now we can't communicate things as well. And I think that's what taboo things do. They also push us sometimes, and sometimes realize things aren't so bad. Some words aren't so taboo, and they're not as bad as we think it is. And we just learn to cope with it. And I think if we just allow ourselves sometimes, not all the time, I can understand that there's some things you just can't not be offended by. That's totally fine, but we should at least allow people to express opinions and whatnot, even if it may offend people in a small way. But at the same time, this question there's no one way answer to this, and there's many perspectives to look, like what would the law be like if this is the case and whatnot. But yeah, that's how I'd answer it.
Thank you very much. I was quite intrigued by what you brought up about the benefits of controversial ideas. So this is just another question I would ask. What are the benefits of controversial ideas for society? If we don't want to shut them off and become like Ray Bradbury's world that he describes in Fahrenheit 451. where reading a book of poetry in front of a group of the wife's friends causes them to faint because they're not used to controversial ideas or any ideas. So what are the benefits of controversial ideas for society? Peter, you've answered that. I'm going to let Dr. Baloney and Break answer first, and then if you want to add anything to that afterwards. Oh no, I can see by the looks on your face, this is a difficult question.
Okay, I'll go first. Okay. So controversial ideas are, I'd say, quite beneficial to society because it makes improvements, you know, like someone says this car is not good enough, then another person will make the car better. Like it leads to improvement and in society. But in terms of like this Christ, I just don't see why. Okay, another thing is that the person who made this set art piece is should be totally responsible for whatever happens. Because if something negative happens because of this art piece, then the artist should be responsible for it. Unless it's, of course, like some physical assault or anything. Yeah. So controversial ideas are beneficial to society, but the artist must take responsibility. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Break. Dr. Baloney, what are your thoughts about the benefits of controversial ideas for society?
Well, obviously, controversial ideas are controversial, but I believe that controversial ideas can be good. I feel like our society wouldn't be here be here at the place where it is if we didn't have some controversial ideas. Like I saw something pop up in the chat like a while ago. Someone said the Earth was round, and here we are. If also some people said, all right, women should have right. All right, we are all the same in race. So I think controversial ideas are good things, but like you then said, the person who says a controversial idea should take full responsibility for it and should be able to back up their statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter, if you want to add anything else from what you said earlier?
Yeah, I think of course there's unless you want to end up in prison, you should follow the law. Make sure that you're not breaching any laws when you state your ideas. But however, there's something really important I would like to mention is that any idea is controversial actually, if you think about it. I mean, anyone can get offended by any idea, it just depends. But I think damn, I just broke my flow of thought. When it comes to ideas, we should I really can't remember what I thought about just now, and it was actually pretty good. At least in my opinion, which is an idea, which is also subjective. But yeah, I really can't remember it. I think you have to just, oh well.
It's okay. I think that's probably a good place to end the question answer session because that was the whole theme of today is how do we deal with controversy in society in a way that's beneficial, and that's what we've been discussing.
Thank you very much, Amy. Yep. So I'm going to put up a poll for everyone, and I would ask that everyone votes.
I got a question.
Yes.
It's not for any of the panelists, it's for the teachers. So we are allowed to vote?
Yes, you are allowed to vote. You don't have to be in character now.
Okay. Yay. Actually, I don't know if that's
I
a good
also
thing or
have a
bad.
question.
Yes.
there's two of us, but does that mean we can only vote once?
I'm afraid that will be the case, but I
Okay.
guess if you have differing opinions, you can let us know on the chat, and we'll count that as well.
Yeah.
Alright, so I'll message privately then.
Okay. Okay. You let Kenny know your vote since only one of you can vote there.
All right, so I'm gonna end the polling. Yeah, and so we have a majority vote for the exhibition of Piss Christ at our local gallery. Yeah. So thank you everyone. Well done.
Awesome.
Art shall live another day.
At least this art.
This is a specific one. Okay. So thank you everyone for participating in this simulation. I think it's been a real blast.